You ready for the big speech? Let's do the big speech. Let's go. But first, let me tell you what I'm actually doing in these videos. What I do for you in these videos is lay out a bunch of general knowledge that many people have already kind of established about this play. I do very little of my own individual reading. My job as a scholar is to provide individual readings to move the ball forward. So I'm going to do for you, so what I often do, teachers' lectures, which cover a lot of introductory material, like the introductory material in your book, is often a bad model for your own undergraduate writing. I speak to you as if you didn't know very much about the subject, so little that in fact you had to take a class in it and you're just learning about it really for the first time. And if you read this play before, it's your first time in college, that you actually have a lot of informational gaps to fill, and I'm here to fill them for you efficiently. When you are writing, it is not your job to fill in informational gaps for me. I'm okay, really. Telling me things you got from the introduction to the book, or from the or from kind of easy online sources, or from me, is not effective as a strategy. What we're trying to teach you to do is to look for yourself closely at a piece of writing and see something that other people haven't already all noticed already. Mostly what I tell you in these videos, most of what your book tells you, is things a bunch of people have noticed before this, and we're just getting you up to speed in the conversation pretty quickly. Getting you up to speed in the conversation is my job. Moving the conversation forward just a little bit is your job. Close reading is a technique where you look very closely at a small, and I mean a small piece of text, and try to tease out every piece of information you can find in it, is a time-honored equalizer for the undergraduate who's in the unenviable position of having to write for an audience of experts. This was a problem for you in high school too, but in high school and before that, your teachers just listened to the stuff you told them. They just let you regurgitate information. College is about you thinking independently, not just giving back basic stuff. So, a quick digression, and then I promise I'll get to be or not to be. I can't skip to be or not to be. When I was a doctoral student, my doctoral advisor, the most important person in my graduate education, was someone who'd written the book that made him famous, and I mean famous for a Shakespeare scholar. He is not mobbed on the streets. But the book that made him famous among other Shakespeare scholars, he published the year I was born. He already knew a vast amount more about the general topic than I will probably amass before I die. When I was just a grad student, it was a deeply unequal situation. He knew just a lot more than I did. That's why he was the teacher. The first time I won an argument with him, it was by accident. I was saying, yeah, okay, you're right, of course, and I mentioned a small, and I mean tiny detail of something. But of course, the larger point, you're right. And he said, oh, yes. Well, in that case, we'll do it your way. And I realized I'd won an argument without trying. Because no matter how much more he generally knew, I could make myself an expert on a small piece of some information that wasn't fresh in his mind, and I began to hoard little pieces of information about the history of Shakespeare's theater, because every one tiny piece of information was good for up to one argument. So I'd say, so, do you know what happened on June 11th, 1594? Oh, you do? You have to go small and in detail to actually produce something new that will be of interest to your audience who are already experts. This is one of the reasons when you get a critical essay about Hamlet out of the databases online, you find it's hard to follow because it's writing for experts and not going over very basic stuff. It's jumping right into a conversation that's been in progress for 400 years. Okay, what you do is look carefully at the words themselves. You don't have time to do research. It's a 300 level class. You're an undergraduate. You have to look at the words themselves. I am going to go through To Be or Not to Be. I'm going to give you the normal thing I give you, which is general background, general reading, a summary of ideas other people have established, sometimes before I was born. And then I'm going to do some argument. I will model what I do when I'm trying to move the argument forward. I will differentiate stuff I am telling you that I got from other people and stuff that I have originated. Okay, first a reading. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time? The oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy makes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin. Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of? Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. Soft you now, the fair Ophelia, nymph in thy orisons, be all my sins remembered. Okay. One thing I noticed just having to read it aloud, and it's always instructive and enlightening to read Shakespeare aloud. The poetry tells you things with how it sounds, and it tells you things when you try to pronounce it. One thing I noticed, this enjams a lot. How do you know it's enjamming? Because I'm constantly out of breath because I got to keep running through the line. It's hard on me. I'm not a trained actor, damn it. How can you see in jam? Here's a quick and dirty trick. Finding enjambment. You might notice there are a lot of periods in the middle of the line. Sentences end halfway through a line. Instead of stopping like an end stop line, stopping the sentence where the line ends and giving everybody a chance to take a breath, Hamlet repeatedly ends his sentence middle of the Macbeth-Tamara line, which tells you no time for a coffee break. Let's just keep on going. So Hamlet, who's always described as being so slow and so thoughtful, and who's soliloquizing rather than acting, his language moves forward at a kind of breakneck pace. The enjambment creates, I'm going to argue here, it creates the speed. What does that, there is an effect, we can observe it. This enjams a lot. What does that mean? One thing it means is it is speeding up. He is being fast when he's complaining about being slow. That's a paradox. That's interesting. We can think about that. Let me throw out one idea of my own too. We are mimicking the racing speed of the character's thoughts. The character is meditative. The character is thinking very, very quickly. His mind is racing. He talked about early, he promised the ghost that he can, as swift as meditation of the thought, as swift as thought, he could go, well, he would go sweep to his revenge. Well, how fast is thought, Hamlet? Ha ha ha. Pretty slow, but also pretty fast. So I'm going to argue this is the enjambment of a racing mind, moving forward crazy fast. Famous comment about this, what happened to the I pronoun? All the other soliloquies there's a heavy I this, I that, my this, I feel, what a rogue and peasant slave. am I? Oh, that is too self, but I peak like John Dreams. Where is I? Nowhere. Even that famous first line, to be or not to be, we move to the infinitive of the verb, the most abstract version, to live or to die. And this is why paraphrasing Shakespeare always loses something. You can say to live or to die. It's to exist or not exist. To be or not to be is nicely iambic. It's nicely pithy. All one syllable words. Don't tell me Shakespeare just uses complicated words. But also, it makes it an existential problem about the nature of existence. And here, Hamlet, who is philosophical, moves out from his own situation to make it a universal, proposes himself as a kind of universal model. This is the problem. Not why should I live or die with my situation. It is why does anyone live? Why do any of us choose to live rather than to die? He makes it as big and universal as possible. This is one of the reasons he's a favorite among scholars. He thinks he's a big picture thinker, and he's a thinker. Let me add some arguments of my own. Let me focus in from line 70. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time? The oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns of patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself, when his quietus make with a bare bodkin. Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. That's in a great list there. Hamlet's language, which has been very abstract, it's very concrete. These are things that make life a drag. Here are problems in life. Oppressor's wrong. The pride, the overweening contempt of proud men. The pangs of despised love, the law's delay. You go to law, you try to sue somebody, it just takes forever. Or crimes are not punished. The insolence of office. People who've got some bureaucratic job and they rub it in your face. The spurs that patient merit of the unworthy takes, you can't get advanced. You're patient and meriting, you're trying to move up at court or wherever in the government, and unworthy people pass you by. These are all genuine problems, genuine down-to-earth problems. Hamlet is speaking in a very down-to-earth, pragmatic way, and that's one of the things that's kind of endearing and engaging about him and about this speech. From to be or not to be, he's gotten down to really concrete things. He, like a good writer, can move between the abstract and the concrete back and forth quickly and smoothly. How many of these problems are Hamlet's problems? Now, this is an argument I have made myself in writing. The proud man's contumely? Are proud people rubbing stuff in his face? Are people, office bearers, being insolent to him? Like Osric, who shows up in Act 5 and just sucks up to him and is ridiculous? Like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? Are they insolent? Are they proud? They're actually kowtowing. They're deferring to him constantly. These things are not problems because he's a prince. The law's delay? Is his lawsuit delayed? So he's having trouble getting a court date? That's strange because it's ridiculous. But it gets worse. The insolence of office. People are being the spurns patient and merit of the unworthy takes. Well, he's been passed over the kingship, but other than that, he's the crown prince of Denmark. Come on. Who would fardels bear, or like heavy burdens, to grunt and sweat under a weary life? I don't know who would fardels bear, but I know Hamlet would not fardels bear. The Prince of Denmark does not bear fardels really under any circumstance. This is an inappropriate image for the character. Shakespeare has other characters who are royal and fantasize about wouldn't it be great to live this simple life, but they don't complain, and they complain about, well, it's so heavy to wear, uneasy the head that wears a crown. Heavy lies the head that wears a crown. It's a Shakespeare line. It's from Henry IV, Part 1. But they don't complain that they've got blue-collar jobs. Hamlet does not grunt or sweat under a weary life. He's not carrying stuff around. He has a couple problems. Most of the problems in this list he does not have. He does have the problem of despised love. He absolutely does. His beloved is refused his letters, refusing to see him, and it's about to get much, much worse because we're going to have to get to another scene right after this. But that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. Hamlet, do you remember Act 1? Do you remember Act 1, Hamlet? Because I seem to recall a traveler returning from the bourne of death. If no one ever returned from death, you would not have these problems and you wouldn't have this plot. Interestingly, this, like, why are you pretending not to know that people do come back? It is actually, this is really interesting here, and here's my argument. Hamlet moves here to things that are generally more or less true, general universal truths that are not true in his specific case. The flip side of, oh, instead of moving beyond his own specific concerns, he broadens out to concerns everyone shares. But he actually broadens out so far, he gets to problems he doesn't have. These are not Prince of Denmark problems. The general problem of not knowing what happens after death is kind of solved when your dead father shows up and commands you off somebody for him. That brings up a whole other set of problems. Hamlet is moving to discuss a whole bunch of problems that are not his and is an excuse to get away from problems that are his. His universalizing and abstraction is here an attempt to evade responsibility, to in fact lie to himself. On some level, one of the most intelligent characters in all of Shakespeare, one of the most thoughtful characters, is on some level in this famous speech deceiving himself, talking himself out of the problem of, like, hey man, you've seen a ghost. You know damn well what happens. What flight others we know not of, like, the ghost is very clear about what's happening after death. He's being punished in torment. Hamlet, why are you lying to yourself? Hamlet might not be trying to decide whether to live or die. He might be trying to talk himself into it. My general argument, found elsewhere, is that Hamlet actually feels guilty that he's not dying, that he feels he doesn't want to lose his life, but he feels he should, and he's trying to talk himself into that fatal encounter. He wants to live, which is natural and healthy. He's trying to argue that it's not. That life itself is this awful thing where you're grunting and sweating again, Hamlet with the sweat, under burdens, and people are giving you a hard time, like, you know, the king's appointees are giving you a hard time. None of these are actually his problems. This is all made up. He is trying to get off the real subject.